Everybody has a story, and every story needs to be heard. On this podcast, we are talking with each member of the General Conference Leadership Council. I'm your host, Alyssa Truman, and this is ANN Profiles. Today, I'm here with Ivan Omana, who is the director of Adventist Chaplaincy Ministries. And I had you help me with your last name because I wanted to do it justice.
You got it. You got it.
Omana.
Yes.
Okay. Where are you from, Ivan Omana?
I'm a little bit from everywhere.
A little bit from everywhere.
But I was born in Venezuela.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm the son of a pastor, so that's why I say I'm a little bit from everywhere. Fourth generation Adventist. Yet, although I was born in Venezuela, we lived in Puerto Rico, and then we also lived in Colombia. So I'm a little bit from everywhere.
A little bit from everywhere. So let's talk a little bit about your childhood years.
Okay.
So you were born in?
I was born in a city called Coro.
Coro.
Yes, it's one of the oldest city in South America. Was founded actually by Christopher Columbus. So it was declared historic patrimony of the world by the UN. Interesting fact about that. I was born there. My father was planting churches in there. That was his first district. And I was born there. And 20 days after, he was transferred to our school in Venezuela. So I never met the city where I was born until I was 30 years old.
Oh, wow.
I was never in that place until I was actually the church I was pastoring at the time decided to celebrate my birthday, taking me to that city.
Well, that's a fantastic church.
Oh, yeah, that was the best.
All right. So you grew up and you said you're fourth generation Adventist.
Yes.
Your father was a pastor.
Yes.
So working for the church was a little bit in your blood. What about your grandfather? Or did anybody else work for the church before your father?
Everybody in my family worked for the church. Yeah. I think I have to go back to my great grandfather, Julio Garcia. Julio Garcia was among the first Seventh-day Adventists in Venezuela. He got baptized in 1922. A colporteur. You know what that is?
I was a colporteur for 7 years,
okay.
Ivan. I know what that one is. But for those who don't know what it is, can you explain a little? What does a colporteur do?
I mean, it's the school of hard knocks.
That is a very good way to put that.
But it was colporteur is you go out and sell the books of the church out in the community. So a colporteur from Puerto Rico, Rafael Lopez Miranda, showed up in Venezuela and went to the city or the town of Camagüey. It's in the flatlands of Venezuela. At that time, remember, this is the 1920s. So at that time, traveling is done by either horse or donkeys or through the river. And he came through the river. He got off the river and went into the main town gate, the main town center, and asked, who are the most important people here? They said, well, Don Rafael Lamas, who is he was born in Egypt, I believe.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly where he was born on, but he is, in Venezuela, they call him the Turco. They all call them Turcos, Turkish. Although they're not from Turkey.
But we call them that.
They call them that. And he was the one who sold everything everybody needed. You know, you needed bed sheets, he got it. You needed whatever, yes. And Don Julio was working with Rafael Lamas, selling feathers for pillows. And Don Julio was also the justice of the peace in town. And so they were the two most important people in town. Rafael went into Julio's house and preached the gospel to them. And then in 1935, Julio Garcia Diaz became the very first Seventh-day Adventist pastor that was born in Venezuela.
Wow. So he joined the church.
He joined the church and became
he gave
a
up
pastor.
selling feathers for pillows and being the justice of the peace and became the first native
Venezuelan-born Seventh-day Adventist pastor. I had the privilege of being he was ordained at the General Conference session in 1935 in San Francisco. And I had the privilege of being in the place where he was ordained.
Not at the same time.
Not at the same time, no. Of course not. You know.
If you were, you're hiding your age very well.
That's a good one.
All right. So he was the first Venezuelan pastor there. He has your grandfather. And does your grandfather
No, he actually had my grandma.
Your grandma. Okay. So your grandma, did she also work for the church?
She also worked for the church. She was a teacher.
Okay.
Now, there's an interesting story about that. I think it's also relevant to what we're going through. We're just coming out of 3 years of pandemic. Remember in the 1920s, there was also another pandemic.
We did have a pandemic.
That was what was called the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu came to Camagüey. And Julio had 5 daughters. Out of the 5 daughters, 3 died.
Oh, wow.
And the youngest one of the 3 was, at the time they were told that whenever anybody died, they had to send them to the barn outside and they had to cremate them. So they took the bodies of the 3 girls and put them outside. Now, this is important. One of the books that Julio bought was the Herald of Health book that was sold by the church at that time. Grandma Maria kept saying, you know what? Emilita, which is the 3rd one of the girls, I don't think she's dead. And she nagged and nagged until Grandpa said, okay, let's go check. And they found out she wasn't dead.
All right, hang on. Sorry. So you're telling me that they actually put her outside?
They put her out in the barn
dead.
as if she was dead.
And your grandmother was like, I don't actually think she's dead.
I don't think she's dead. And so they went back there. And Emilia was my grandma.
Wow.
And using the principles of health that they learned from that book, Grandma Maria brought Emilia back to life. Emilia married another man, and we can go there later.
That story just blows my mind because wow. Sorry. There's rarely am I speechless in these, but that one has me. That is such an incredible testimony because she had to have listened to the prompting of the Spirit, really, to be like, yeah, I know we've brought her out to the barn, but I don't think she's dead yet. She's only kind of dead.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
she was
incredible.
Very sick. She was very sick because she got the flu, but it was great. It was, I think it was a God intervention during the pandemic, during the years that we were all scooped up in our homes. I kept thinking about that. And it kind of gave me the hope that, you know what? We're going to get out of this one.
So your grandmother goes on and becomes a teacher. Has your father.
She actually had 5 boys.
5, wow. 5 girls?
No, 5 boys.
No, your
the 5
grandmother
girls
came from the 5.
Yeah.
So they had 5 girls, and then she turns on and has 5 boys. I feel like you're going to have a lot of children here in this story. But I know that's not how this story ends here. But so you have 5. There's 5 brothers.
My dad and 4 uncles.
Okay. And where does he fall in the lineup?
My dad's the oldest.
Okay.
And he very quickly decided to be a pastor. Very quickly.
Do you know why?
I have never had that conversation with him. You know, maybe that's something I need to talk with him about because I've never heard the why, the answer to the why question on that. I just know that he was determined to be a pastor. So he goes to, at the time, there was no school in Venezuela, so he had to go to Colombia, to our school in Colombia. Interesting. He goes there, graduates 1966.
Okay.
And gets a call to go be an associate pastor in Caracas, Venezuela. And worked for about 6 months. And there were some financial issues, I think, or something. And the conference president called him to his office and told him to his face, you're not a good pastor. Go study theology go study medicine or something else. And my dad was devastated, of course, at the time. And my grandpa, this is a story I hear. My grandpa called him and said, are you sure you're called to be a pastor? Yes. Okay, you're going to Puerto Rico to finish. Because at that time, there was only 2 years of theology. So it was an associate degree, if you will. So you're going to Puerto Rico to finish. Okay. So he went to Puerto Rico. That's where he met my mom. They graduated. They graduated May 20th. Yes, May 20th of 1968, and got married May 21st. And from the banquet hall, after the reception, they went straight to the airport because they had a call to go back to Venezuela. And he was first in Barquisimeto, and then they changed him to Coro, where I was born. And then the conference decided to transfer him to the school. Okay,
so I want to kind of revisit one little thing here.
Okay.
I want to encourage you. And for those of you who are listening, I want to encourage them to ask the whys of their parents.
Oh, yeah.
Because as our family members get older, we are only given a certain amount of time. And the legacy that we pass on is very important. And to see how God has moved in people's lives. But it's also a challenge to us to make sure, I know that you have a daughter, because I have met her, for us to share our stories with our children so that when someday they may sit on a podcast like this, that they know these stories, because it's so important for us to be able to pass that heritage. Like, I'm listening to you tell the story of your great-grandfather and your grandmother and this. And so many people do not understand the legacies that have come before you. I love the fact you're giving me dates, you're giving me cities. So many people do not have the same kind of information. And I can see it has shaped who you have become. And I think that it's just something I kind of wanted to throw out there for the listeners, because it is important to understand where we've come and also to pass that heritage down to our children so they can have that same kind of faith. They can understand, that generationally.
Yeah.
All right. But so your parents, they get married right out of college.
College.
To be fair, I was 29 days out of college when I got married.
Okay.
But not one day. That's pretty quick. So they get out of college, they move back to Venezuela. He feels more equipped to be a pastor. I love the fact that your grandfather was like, if God is calling you, don't let somebody challenge that calling.
Yeah.
Because I think too often in our lives, there's always going to be the negatives. There's always going to be the people who don't think that you are qualified or that you were called or whatever. But that doesn't disqualify those who God has called.
I call those my porcupines.
So explain why.
Because those are people who prick you. But the interesting thing about that is I learned, sadly, later in my ministry. In the beginning, I had those porcupines, and I went to them, and I got pricked. But then I learned that I do not need to go hugging porcupines. I let them hug me.
No need to go into a battle that you don't need to go into.
Exactly.
I love that. That's a really great takeaway. All right. So you are now born. Congratulations.
Yes.
It's a boy.
First of three.
First of three. Okay. I'm also from three.
Okay.
Boys or girls?
All boys.
I was all girls.
Nice.
So, all right. So he has three boys and he's now working at the Adventist college there.
Adventist school, yes. Okay. He's the dean of men at the time.
The dean of men.
Yeah.
My dad was also
nice.
Wow, I feel like we're getting so many things that are in common that we didn't even know about here.
So he was the dean of men, and somehow there were some problems, and the principal of the school decided to fire him again.
Wow. He's put through the ringer for being testing whether or not.
Yeah, he was put through the ringer. And once again, Grandpa comes and says, "Are you sure?" He's like, "Yes, Dad, I am sure." By then, it's only me. He still has not had my other two brothers. And my grandpa says, "Okay, remember, my mom is from Puerto Rico. They met in the school in Puerto Rico." So he says, "Go back to Puerto Rico and spend some time there so that you can go to Andrews and get your master's, do your seminary."
Grandfather's
He was very, very supportive of his ministry. Very, very supportive of my dad's ministry. He died when I was 10 years old, but I can still remember some of the things that he would do to support my dad. We go to Puerto Rico, and when we get to Puerto Rico, the gentleman that used to be the president in Venezuela became the president of the East Conference in Puerto Rico. And he says to my dad, "You know what, Ivan? I know you didn't have a good experience as a dean, but I think you can do a great job as a church pastor. So how about this? We're going to send you to this district. The previous 5 pastors have committed adultery or have left the ministry. Just go there, see what you can do." And so we end up in Fajardo, Puerto Rico. And that's where my second brother is born. And that's where my dad is ordained to the gospel ministry. And we had an awesome time. We still have friends. I was a kid. I was 3 years old. That's where I showed my first glimpses of a call to ministry.
All right. How? You're 3 years old. Tell me.
No, at the time, I think I'm four and a half.
So you're so much more wise and mature because you're now 4.5.
Yeah.
So 4.5.
Dad is sick. He got really, really sick because he had kidney stones. I remember as a 4.5 years old, I remember my dad being very, very sick, but I don't remember much of anything else. Mm-hmm. We lived on a street where the first elder of the church was like 3 houses down from us. And the associate pastor was about 2 blocks away. And I remember they came to our house on a Wednesday night to pick my mom and me up to take us to church. Dad was sick, so he stayed home. And then I am told, I do not know this to be the fact, but that I am told that I took my dad's briefcase and I dressed up. I asked my mom to dress me up. And when I got to church, I went straight through the middle of the church all the way to the platform. And I told everybody that because my daddy was sick, I was going to preach in his place.
You're 4.5.
Yeah,
ish.
4.5, maybe. Yeah, maybe 5 years old. It was.
Did you actually preach?
They say I said a bunch of things. I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
It might not have been the longest sermon ever.
Yeah.
But you already felt this impression that
at that moment, that's when, for the first time, I showed that.
Wow. So you already are catching this little bug. Which also means that your father must have been a beautiful example to you. Let's talk a little bit about your relationship with your father. Because I find that children, pastors' kids, there's a lot of bad rap that sometimes can go along with it. I think it's often because the church expects too much out of them. We expect perfection, but we're all still human. So I told my children very clearly when I came to work here at the GC, I was like, I want you to be who you are. You are different from me. You are your person. But there must have been a pretty good relationship, it seems like, at least in these beginning years, for you to want to even think about going and standing in his place.
Let me just say that I can only think about one period of my life when I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. And it wasn't that we were fighting each other, and it was just I hated that at that particular moment of in time, my father accepted a call. And so I'm a teenager. For the first time, I kind of looked to the girls, and there was this girl that I liked and so forth. And then all of a sudden, we're moving to Colombia. I'm like, no, we're not.
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are. Come on. I remember when I got to Colombia, the first day I went to school. I was a junior in high school, and I was asked to introduce myself. And I said, my name is Ivan Omana, and I'm getting out of this dump tomorrow.
Welcome to Colombia.
I hated it for the beginning. Then I started having, developing friends, and I started developing ministry and doing things. And then right now, every time I take a vacation, I go to Colombia.
Oh, that's interesting. I think that we don't often think about the toll that calls take on families.
Yeah.
My children also moved in their teenage years to come up here. We uprooted them within 2 weeks of getting a call so we could get them in school up here. It is very hard for our children.
It is.
Let alone to expect them to basically be perfect. So you have to be perfect, and we're going to uproot you and move you wherever you may have your parents be called.
Now, getting back to the question you asked, besides that time when I was angry at my dad for accepting that call, I've always had a very close relationship with my dad. Always. It has become stronger in the last years, in the last probably about 10, 15 years, because we have been connected by this ministry that we both have. When I have a ministry question, when I have something that has to do with ministry, I know I can pick up the phone and call my dad. My dad served this church for 45 years.
Wow.
And he was from the dean in a school to a district pastor to a conference departmental director, conference secretary, union president, and division departmental director.
Wow. So obviously your father managed to get through the people not thinking that he was going to be a good pastor.
Oh yeah.
So he found his calling, and the Spirit really was able to lead. Now, did he do all this in Colombia?
Remember, we started in Venezuela, then moved to Puerto Rico. Then that conference president went back to Venezuela, and the first thing he does is he calls my dad to come back to Venezuela.
Okay.
So my dad comes back to Venezuela. By the way, elder Ernesto Santos, he died last December. Outstanding man of God. I always respected him since I was a boy. So Elder Santos called my dad back to Venezuela, and then my dad was pastor of the church in the school, and then went to be the personal ministries director of the conference, then became the executive secretary of the conference, then went to be the principal of the school. So everything you can do in this church, I think my dad has done it. And I think that's the reason why I have such a good relationship with him. But notice this, my father was never a chaplain.
Which is the area you decide to go to. So let's actually talk about how you get there. Okay, so you're in Colombia, now in high school. Have you felt the call to ministry pre-Colombia? I know that you preached at 5. But when did you start feeling this kind of call towards ministry?
I think I need to backtrack a little bit and talk a bit about something, then we can go there. Because you see, during this time, I'm teenager, and I bit into the biggest unwritten lie we Seventh-day Adventists have. You have to be perfect.
Oh, wait, we don't? I'm joking. I know that we don't need to be perfect. Okay. So you had bought into this, though.
I bought into that. And so my constant strife were, I had to do the best youth program. I had to be the best Pathfinder director they could be. I had to sing the best songs, and I had to be in the best tune, because whatever I did not only reflected badly on my theology on my identity as an Adventist, but also reflected badly on my family. Oh, the son of Pastor Omana. There you go.
No pressure.
No. So I went through this, and it was I did ministry, but because it was such a drag, if you will, such a I have to do this this way or I'm going to get in trouble. It never came to me as a career choice until graduated from high school at the tender age of 16 years old.
Oh, that's young.
Yeah. And we were in Colombia at the time. I come to my dad, my mom, and I say, well, I want to go to college. And we are right there where we are in a college. So I go, I want to go to college. And my dad says, yeah, you have that. Yeah, that's a plan. Yeah, but I don't see anything here. I wanted to study physics and be a physics professor. And my dad says, okay, you're going to go to a Seventh-day Adventist school to get your physics degree. Okay. Yet you're too young to be out there on your own by yourself. So let's do this. Stay here in Colombia and take the basic courses. Whatever basic courses you take here will be acceptable in any school in the world with the Seventh-day Adventist Church. There was no choice. I was going to go to a Seventh-day Adventist university or college. So, okay, sure. So at the time, they only had 3 career choices. I could either do theology or do administration, business administration, or I could do music. Music was something I liked, but I had already taken 6 years of music.
You were done with music.
Business administration has never been my forte. I mean, I was going to be a physics teacher, but you get what I get it. So the only choice I have is I take the general credits of theology. And in my first semester, I get to take a class, and it's actually a no credit class, but it is mandatory. Everybody has to take it, and it's called pastoral formation. Pastoral formation.
It's like your spiritual life.
No, it was just identifying your pastoral, learning to identify your pastoral identity, if you will.
Okay. So it's kind of helping you figure out like where you're going to fit in and like what your strength would be. And,
exactly. Okay. A man of God gave me that class. Elder Itamar de Paiva. Loved it. He had a very strong Portuguese accent. He's from Brazil.
Was he a missionary?
Yes.
He has an incredible... His family has an incredible story.
Yeah, of course. I know. I knew the rest of the family. And I knew the family that suffered what they suffered in Palau.
Yeah.
I know the story about that, their story. Anyways, Pastor Itamar Sabino de Paiva, with his very heavy accent, just broke my heart. Just broke the hardness of my heart. And by the end of that first semester, I went like, perhaps I can do this. And I started doing ministerial practice classes. They would send us to churches around the city in Medellin where we played pastors with real people. And I loved it. I liked it. I liked what I was going through. I liked what was happening. And thus began a little bit of the realization that I really didn't have to be perfect. All I had to do is love people. It was a little bit because okay. I kept on that need to be perfect thing, that perfection theme, and that lack of grace. And Alyssa, this is important. This is a lack of grace to myself, because I can't give grace to anybody unless I have accepted it and lived it with myself. That's such an
important thing. And I think it's something that many of us can identify with. I rarely find that my lack of grace, or like, it's rarely what people are putting on me. It is this perception within myself that I have to. And interestingly, for me growing up, I don't feel like the church ever made me feel that way. It somehow was something I created for myself. And once we start seeing that glimpse of the Savior, and the more we break, actually the stronger we become, because our strength is in Him. So you're going through this, and at the end of your first year, where are we?
End of the first year, it was interesting. That was the year that I did the only vacation I did colporting. Once and for I did it once.
Oh, come on. I did it 7 years. You're telling me you only did one?
Good for you. Good for you. I did it once, and I did it because it was mandatory. I could not register for the second year unless I did it.
Okay, well then. Some of the other members of GCLC who I'm going to be interviewing, they were actually my colporter leaders.
Oh yeah. All right, you be careful of that one.
I will.
And that year also.
So real quick, how was that experience for you? Because you only did it for one time. What? Because it is a hard experience.
Hard knocks.
It's where you learn how to deal with rejection. I know a lot of people kind of think it's like a very old school, we shouldn't do this kind of thing anymore. There's a lot to be said about it.
Yes.
But it is a trial by fire. You really learn who you are as a person during that. So what was that colporter experience like for you?
Listen, I did 10 years of church ministry after I graduated. And if for nothing else, I learned from colporting how to help people make decisions for Christ. Yeah, sometimes I manipulated people into making a decision.
Oh, hey, at least you're honest. There's this fine line that sometimes we have to work through in the process.
Yeah. Well, remember, I hope my friends from the IAD will not feel very bad when I say this, but I was in the IAD at the time, Inter-American Division at the time, and at the time, hopefully things have changed now, but at the time there was such pressure to reach baptismal goals and to, it was, so I was pushing people to get baptized.
I think we want numbers, and do not misunderstand me. I want to see new brothers and sisters within our church.
Me too.
But there is this tension, because really what I want is for people to be new creatures in Christ. And sometimes you can become a new creature in Christ, and that journey to the baptismal pool of the Seventh-day Adventist Church
will take some time.
Can take longer time, and sometimes we don't. We want to put those two things together. And I think it's something that we are trying to do better on as a church. But we probably, let's be honest, we probably have a way to go, because we're always learning.
Well, I'm finding in my new responsibilities, I'm finding that there is a switch in the way we do things now. And the mission of the church, and this is not the topic of our story, but I think it's important for us to bring it out there. The mission of the church has become about much more than just baptisms.
Discipleship.
Yes.
Has become it's a big, I don't like to use the word buzzword, but it's it's become something that we've moved to the forefront. It's not enough to baptize them. We need to disciple them. We need to nurture. We need to teach people what it's like to actually have a relationship.
I love the way Elder Koller presents that, because he uses the term integration. It's as if if I want this, I have some water here, and if I want to give it some flavor, I got to integrate some lemon in it. The lemon and the water become one.
Yeah.
So, or how Jesus put it, you are to be the salt of the world. Well, the salt, it needs to be present in the food.
Yeah, you don't really just want to eat salt by itself.
You got it.
Not so great.
I said, I was in the cold convention last year, and the Lord put upon my heart to keep saying, and I said it many times, it's time for us to stop being the salt in the cupboards. It's time for us to be the salt actually in the food.
I like that. All right. So you colportered.
I did colporting.
You got through it.
And I also had to become a master guide.
Oh, I'm a master guide.
Yeah. Well,
congratulations.
You could not register to the second semester unless you were a master guide, invested it.
Wow. That's like a next level. I mean,
yeah. So I became a master guide, and then because I was a master guide, they made me the Pathfinders director of the school of the church Pathfinders Club. I had the biggest Pathfinders Club in the Colombo Venezuelan Union. At the time, I was the director. 17 years old.
Wow. I wish we had more 17-year-old Pathfinder directors. They have a whole lot more energy than us 40-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah. And then finished my second year of theology. And by then I'm 18 years old. And I go, okay, Dad, it's time for me to go. And I had already made a choice. I came to CUC.
Which is Columbia Union College, which is now Washington Adventist University, which is here in Maryland, United States.
And there was a reason why I came to CUC at the time. They were the only ones who had a minor in computer science.
Okay.
And I love computers. I loved anything that has to do with technology. I'm there. And so I wanted to come and do that here. And I came, but I never did it.
So you never even got that far?
No, I came. I did I graduated from CUC, but I never did anything in computer science.
Oh, okay. So what did you graduate with a degree in?
Theology, religion, and psychology.
Oh, so you didn't end up going the physics route at all?
No.
Okay.
Religion and psychology. Loved psychology. Took a class with Dr. Hammond here, and he changed my view. I remember the day of my graduation, the theology majors had to do the Sabbath school lesson. And he was so proud of me because I remember that. I don't even remember the topic of the Sabbath school lesson, but I connected the topic with principles of psychology. And at the end, he came, I stepped down from the platform at Sligo Church, and he came down and hugged me. I said, I'm so proud of you, my son. That's so good. That's so good.
I love when people on the podcast shout out their teachers. And like you've totally recognized a lot of people. I think often people don't realize the influence that they have on us.
Yeah.
And it's tremendous. And it's the little things. It's these moments where they affirm God's calling on your life that can often help us in the hardest times.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
So after you graduate, what do you do with this degree? And have you met anyone special at this point? Not yet. Okay.
Not yet.
I'm not sure because you and I have not talked enough that I don't know your story. So I'm like, I know at some point someone special does enter this scenario, but we'll get there, I guess.
Okay, we'll get there. Yeah.
Where do you go from here?
I graduated. Jerry Page, who used to be the ministerial director here, was the Pennsylvania Conference president at the time.
What years was this?
This is 1990.
Okay.
And I'm class of 1990. And he extended an invitation But I felt like I needed to go back to Venezuela. By then, my father is the union president, and they paid 70% of my tuition. So I felt like I had a debt of gratitude. So I hop on a plane, and I'm going back to Venezuela with a letter that says that I'm to be the chaplain. I wanted to be a chaplain.
Okay, so at this point, have you moved towards nope, you just wanted to try
I wanted
out
to be a chaplain.
Okay.
I wanted to be a chaplain. My chaplain here at the school in CUC was Randy Wisby at the time, and I worked with him.
I remember him.
And I liked chaplaincy. Something about chaplaincy called me, but I didn't know what it was or anything. But I get a call that says I'm to be the chaplain at our school in Venezuela. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going. So I get there. My father picks me up from the airport and says, son, I'm sorry. The union board has decided to change your call. And you're going to be the associate pastor of the church, the Central District in Valencia. Valencia is the second largest city in Venezuela. So I get there. The day of my birthday, July 31st, 1990. I'm turning 21 years old, Alyssa. And that day, my senior pastor sits me in his office and says, okay, the district has 12 congregations. The Central Church and 11 other churches. You're the pastor for the other 11.
Oh, wow.
Here are the keys. And you're going to be teaching you're going to be teaching the Bible classes in the 2 schools that we have in the district, and you're going to be the Master Guide Club director here at the main church, and you're going to be the counselor for the youth department. So I feel
like they should have given you a few more jobs.
Yeah,
it seems like you don't quite have enough.
12 congregations, and I'm single at the time.
That's helpful, at least.
And but I made the biggest mistake of my life, Alyssa. I had saved some money and I bought a car. And that car I bought was cheap. I think I would have it would have been better if I thrown that money away.
Oh.
That thing was broken most of the time. And I say that was the biggest mistake of my life because I come at things from the perspective of being educated here in the United States. I have the money, I can buy the car, I'll buy it. That's not the way you do things in Venezuela at that time. You had to ask permission from the conference, and because they had a vote that said that none of their young pastors in the first 2 years could buy a car. So that car made me get into so many problems because the conference was not happy that I had a car.
How did they expect you to get to all the different? Because I'm sure that, obviously, if they have this vote, they must have assumed. So how do you normally get around to all these places?
Bosses, I guess, boss.
Okay.
And walking or, a bicycle or whatever,
But not a car.
Not a car. You could not have a car.
So did you get rid of said car?
Let me tell you one story about that car. Just one story about that car.
Wait. We have a story for the car.
Yeah. Just one story. It's a 13th Sabbath. And on the 13th Sabbath, we're supposed to have communion services, and every church is expecting to have communion service on the 13th Sabbath. Thursday of that week, the stupid car breaks up again. So I take it to the shop. It was a church member who was my mechanic. I take it to the shop, and he says, I'm going to take care of this. This is a simple matter. So he calls me that Friday afternoon and says, car is ready. I just need to take my daughter to the bus station, which is on the way to your house. So I'll take my daughter, and then I'll take the car to you, and you bring me back home. Sure, no problem. Yes. Friday night, 11 p.m. Nobody comes. I figured maybe he didn't find it. There weren't any cell phones or anything at that time. I figured maybe something, he didn't get the part or something. So okay. about midnight, somebody's knocking on my door, and I go, and he is crying. The church member, he's crying, and he's like, "I'm sorry, Pastor. Your car got stolen." So, okay, we went, went to the police and reported it. And long story short, next day I go to all the churches with a church member that had a taxi. I paid him for the gas, and he took me to all the churches to do the communion services. And there's another part of the story that I'm not gonna tell you, but the thing is, about 2 weeks later, the police calls me. They found the car. And the only thing they stole was the air conditioning from the car.
Well, that's a good thing. Although Venezuela is hot, so I think air conditioning would have been fantastic for you. But there's something kind of intriguing here to me. How do you hit 11 churches in one day for communion? I know that sounds weird, but I kind of got hung up on that there. How do you get through 11 churches in one Sabbath for communion?
You go one after the other.
What time is your last communion service of the day?
It was about 6 p.m. Yeah. Another one of those 13 Sabbath. It was such an automatic thing that I got to the last church, and we started. I asked the deacons to come forth so that they could take the emblems to the church members. And I started saying it to everybody that they could take off the emblems, and we hadn't even prayed. So there was one of the ladies in the church kept, "Pastor."
it's like we're really trying to help you understand what you're missing here.
Pastor. And I realized what had happened and said, "Oh, today we're going to do it differently. We're going to give you all the emblems, and then we're going to pray."
Oh, it's a good thing that tradition doesn't dictate how we have to do that.
Oh, yeah. I have stories about that, but no.
Okay. So you serve in Venezuela. How long are you in this church district?
In that place, I was there for 2 years.
Okay.
In that place, I met Annabelle, my wife.
This is where.
Yeah. She used to work for the ABC. She was responsible for the quarterly materials. And I think God arranged this, because the quarterly always went to the wrong churches. The materials that were supposed to get to this church got to this one, and so I go to the ABC one Monday, which was my off day. I had to travel 2 hours to get to the ABC office. And I see that beautiful young lady. I'm like...
You're like, please continue sending them to the wrong churches so that I can keep visiting.
Yes. And we started dating. And about a year and a half later, we got married. And she became the biggest blessing God gave me.
We're going to get a little bit more into that, into your story. But we have a few more years before we...
Do we have enough time?
We're going to make it through here.
Okay.
So we might maneuver a little bit faster through some of these years, because that's an important part of your story that I want to make sure that we give adequate time.
Okay.
So at what point do you move into chaplaincy?
Well, I did 10 years of church ministry in Venezuela.
Okay.
I was in the first associate pastor. Then I got married. And no sooner I got married than the conference took me seriously, I guess. And they put me at the head of...
So if you want to get taken seriously, get married.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what?
I'm joking. I'm kind of joking just to be fair.
I'm actually with you on that, because they sent me to this new district to be the pastor of that district. But they brought me to where the conference headquarters were in that place. And I think it was more about bringing Annabelle to the office, because she was the cashier of the conference. But I'm not going to go into that. Anyways, we get there. A year later, we have our daughter, Yvonne. I was in that district for 3 years, got ordained at the end of that time, and they gave me the response. Then Maranatha decides that they want to go and build 25 churches in Venezuela.
Okay.
And the only thing they required was they wanted a pastor who could speak English and Spanish. And at the time I was the only one. So guess what?
That's you.
I ended up being the one working with Maranatha, and they gave me some other responsibilities. When we finished that, I went to my conference president. I said, I know you guys don't have a budget for me to stay here in the conference. So, any open district, I'll go get it. And they sent me to this district that I was the first ordained pastor they ever had. Those were the best 4 months I ever had.
4 months.
I was in that district just for 4 months. I didn't even have a chance to open all the boxes. We moved into an apartment, the only two-story building in the entire town. It was a small town, one street to come in, one street to come out, 5 churches in that place. And I just had a best of time in that place. And then all of a sudden, the conference president says, we need you. And they moved me back to the church where I started. But by then, the church is pretty big. It's 1,300 members.
Oh, wow.
And so they wanted to give me a district, but it was too big. So what they decided was they gave me that church, and they gave me an associate pastor who took care of 6 other congregations, and I kept another, just a small congregation that was close by. We grew with that church. It was an awesome. That's the church who took me to my birthday, my 30th birthday in where I was born. We had an awesome time. My first elder of that church, we became such good friends that to this day we call each other weekly.
Oh, I love that.
His youngest son became a chaplain, and I had the privilege of mentoring him through the whole process. And just last month, he works for Advent Health, and he was calling me and telling me that they have begun the process for his ordination. And you can bet I'm going to cancel on anyone to be there for that ordination, because that young boy is as if it was my son. Mm-hmm. I baptized him when he was 8 years old. Yeah, I'm old.
We don't need to tell anyone how old he is now. Okay, anyways, although we did say what years you were graduating from college, so I think at this point we kind of all can start doing math and deductive skills.
It's out of the bag. So I come 2000 to Orlando, Florida. I'm on my way to Toronto for the general conference session. I had never been to the conference to the GC session. Never made it there.
You never made it to the GC session.
Got to Orlando and, started visiting things and, going around, went to the parks and all that. And then visited the hospital. And being in the hospital, I started asking questions about chaplaincy. And they said to me, do you have CPE? I said, what's that? So they had to explain that CPE is Clinical Pastoral Education. It's a course that you have to take for chaplaincy. Do you have a master's? No. In Venezuela, you went to the master's. You went and got the master's as a recognition that you had already developed very well as a pastor. Okay. You ordained? Yes, I am.
You're like 1 out of 3.
1 out of 3. And you're bilingual. We need somebody bilingual. Had an interview. And after the interview, I went to my brother's house. My brother lived in Orlando at the time. And from the time I left the interview to the time I got to the house, they had called 3 times. They offered me the job.
Oh, wow.
I didn't have any CPE. I didn't have a master's. I was only ordained, but You're bilingual. I'm bilingual, yes. So they're like, okay, let's do this. I went back to Venezuela, preached that at my church on Wednesday night, and said, by the way, we are leaving next month. We're going to Orlando. And the rest is history. I come to Orlando in 2000 and become a CPE student, and then they hired me as a chaplain. I worked for them since 2000, September 15 of 2000 until October 22nd of 2015.
Chaplaincy is it's a very different work than pastoral work.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I've had academy chaplains, and it wasn't until my parents were actually in a pretty horrific car accident that I understood the joy of journeying with somebody through the hardest, darkest moments. I was at a hospital in Denver, and it was during COVID. And so nobody could really come. I didn't even know anybody because I'm in the middle of nowhere. And it was a hospital chaplain who came to see me within that first 12 hours of me being in that hospital. And I immediately felt this safe place where I could break down, I could cry, I could share my struggles. And I didn't even know the guy, But a hospital chaplain has the privilege of journeying with families, often through the hardest moments. I mean, they can, be there for a birth or whatever, but really hospital chaplains are there during hard moments. So it's a pretty big transition to go from being like the master guide leader and a this and a that to walking through people during these hard moments. How many years were you in that role? Is that where when you moved up here to the GC, were you in that role up until that time, or?
No, I did my units of CPE, ended up doing 9 units of CPE. You need 4 only. But yeah, I got issues. That's another story.
Actually sound kind of like me, so it makes sense to me.
No, but you see, the thing is, I did my units of CPE and developed myself as a leader within Adventist Health. At the time, Adventist Health, now Advent Health. And in 2015, I went to San Antonio. I didn't stay for the general conference session. I just went to the chaplains.
You don't seem like you actually make it to GC sessions, Ivan. It sounds kind of like, I'm going to go to Toronto. I'm going to get stopped tonight. You need to actually, did you go to the last one?
That was my first one ever.
Okay.
Anyway, so
the next one we're gonna have all the exhibits and stuff, so it's gonna be more interesting
good.
There.
So, but I go to 2015. I go to the chaplains conference.
Okay.
I have at the time I'm finishing my research for my dissertation, my Doctor of Ministry dissertation, and so they asked me to. Dr. Ceballos asked me to present what I had learned in my experience, and when I walked out, the elder Paul Anderson from the North American Division comes to me and says, "Hey, we have a position as an associate. Are you interested? Assistant director of chaplaincy. Are you interested?" I said, "I might be." Long story short, that was in June. In October 22nd, I was moving to California to be the assistant director for the North American Division West region. Okay. So I did that until November of 2021.
Let's talk a little bit, and then we're going to get to the November 2021. Let's talk a little bit about what you learned, how you grew as a person by becoming a chaplain. Because I have a feeling that those years of chaplaincy actually are going to help prepare you for a very hard time in life. What did chaplaincy teach you?
Taught me to trust God. It taught me that on this side of eternity, there is no control. Control is just an illusion. It taught me that phrase where Paul is telling God, he says, 3 times I asked God to take this thorn in my flesh. And 3 times God says, my grace is sufficient. But you see, it also taught me that we Seventh-day Adventists, we love that statement, my grace is sufficient, but we stop in the wrong place. Because that's not all that God says to Paul. My grace is sufficient because my power becomes perfect in your weakness. So it is at the weakest times in humanity's history where God is the strongest. So that's perhaps the biggest lesson I got.
I feel like we're kind of just like zoomed through the years that actually bring you to where you are at the GC. But November 2021 is when you get a call to the GC. Let's talk about the call a little bit, how you felt, but then let's also talk about what was happening at that time.
Well, the initial call came in at the end of July when the executive committee voted to extend the call to me so that I could come to be associate director of ACM. It was July 26 when they extended the call. August 13, we noticed a couple of little grains on both sides of my wife's neck. And we started the process to try to find out what was going on. By the end of September, it was discovered that it was cancer, and it was already stage 4. It was a very aggressive kind of cancer, rhabdomyosarcoma alveolar. It even sounds almost as a predator or something like that. So we were dealing with that. We were fighting with that cancer. The cancer gave signs that it was going to be okay. December 20th of 2021, she had a CT scan that showed that everything, all the tumors in her body were gone, except the original ones. And by December 27th, just 6 days later, it had spread again everywhere. So, and it was never under control. It developed resistance to chemotherapy 3 times. She gave it the fight of her life, but just 3 days after my appointment at the general conference session, she died.
So this is in 2022.
Yeah. I was appointed June 8th at night was taken the vote, and June 12th she died.
She's the love of your life.
Yeah.
When you lose someone so close to you, there's not really anything that I can say. Everything feels kind of trivial. The fact that you'd been in chaplaincy for so long, you'd helped people through this very thing. You had journeyed with people, and here you were journeying through this on the other side. And I know that I listened to you talk about your wife. We've talked a little bit here and there and stuff, and I know that it was like one of those loves of a lifetime. that you adored her, and she was supportive of your ministry. Obviously, go from Venezuela to Orlando, for people who have gone through, or maybe are in the midst of going through this journey, is there any words that you could speak to them?
Don't hide your feelings. Don't deny them. Some people have reached out to me because they read something I wrote on social media. I think I wrote it on Facebook. The day I had to, when she died, she asked that she wanted to be cremated, and she wanted her ashes to be scattered in the creek behind my parents' house in North Carolina. And right after that, I wrote, and I used something I learned. As a chaplain, you gather stories, you gather experiences. By now, you've seen that. one night I get called in Orlando, in the big hospital in Orlando, to go minister to a family. Mom has died, passed away. And the whole family is right there next to the bed. Everybody's taking care of everybody. But there's Cody sitting, 8 years old, sitting on the floor, doodling on a piece of paper. And I saw that everybody was okay over there, so I went and sat next to Cody. Hey, Cody. Hey, chaps. You know what's going on there? Yeah, my mom died. He's drawing. Never lifted the pen from the paper. Yeah, my mom died. And then I asked the questions, and how do you feel? And he once again, didn't leave the pen from the paper, but simply said, it feels like somebody took a poop in my insides. And then started to cry. And I cried with him. When I was going through that, that's exactly how I felt. And it's okay. You're a human being. The one that died was somebody very important to me. And if I cry, it's not because I don't have any faith. It's because I'm human. So, yeah, accept it. Accept the loss. It's difficult. It's not easy. It's going to be, as a matter of fact, tomorrow will be 7 months. I miss her like crazy. But I have to get up every morning, look to my right side and know that she's not there. It hurts. I can't do anything to avoid that hurt.
We have such a beautiful promise as Adventists that we'll one day see our loved ones again. But I love what you said, to just embrace the hurt. It's what makes us human. It doesn't mean I don't have faith. It means I loved deeply. Mm-hmm. And there is a differentiation there. And I want to thank you for sharing that, because I know that there are many people who are walking that path.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy path.
It's not.
To walk. So thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
For sharing that. Thank you for joining me here today.
It's my pleasure.
I found that we actually had a lot more in common than I knew. I just want to thank you for the work that you're doing with Adventist Chaplaincy Ministries.
I love it. I love the work that I'm doing. What is it that they say? You enjoy what you work and you never work a day in your life.
You know, for many people, they may feel called to ministry in some sort. I want to encourage those of you who are watching, who are listening, to consider, if God is laying on your heart ministry, to maybe even ask him about chaplaincy. It's a very special gift to be able to walk through this kind of road with people, to journey with them. And the world needs more chaplains. You can be a chaplain in hospital system. You can be a chaplain within schools. You can be a military chaplain. There's many different times, many different places that you can be in chaplaincy. What is the website? If people want to go and learn more about Adventist chaplaincy, where would they go?
There are two websites. One of them would be www.adventistchaplains.org.
Okay.
But if they want a little bit more, they want to learn a little bit more about the education that's required, etc., they can go to www.adventistchaplaincyinstitute.org.
Okay. Thank you so much,
My
Ivan.
pleasure.
And thank you, those of you who have stayed and you've spent this time. We recognize that every minute that you spend listening to this is a gift. So thank you for taking the time to join Ivan and I and to be able to hear his story. And we hope that it brought you some encouragement and some inspiration as you move forward with your day ahead. Tune in to ANN Profiles each week as we interview new members of General Conference Leadership Council. And we encourage you to take a few seconds and to subscribe wherever it is that you're listening or watching this, so that you'll always be notified of our next episode. We hope you have a wonderful day. God bless.